irritation. If you just put the harness right on the horse, he would get all kinds of sores on his neck.
So boys and girls, if you think about if you have a dog at home with a collar and you want to take him for a walk, it would kind of hurt if he's trying to pull the other way. Sometimes dogs wear the harnesses. You think about the Iditarod sled dog race. When they're pulling for so many miles, they wear a harness rather than a collar, and they're pulled by the harness. That's where the gang line and the tug line are attached to. Same with horses.
These are called a ripple tree in English. That is it goes like this, and one horse is hooked to one side, one horse is hooked to the other, and then it's hooked up to the wagon or the plow or whatever you're using it for. And these are drill presses that we use later to make, in wood shops, to make holes. It's a couple big wagon wheels, lightning rod from one of the old barns, handmade storage barrel. This is St. John from the church over at Ward Road in Niagara Falls Boulevard, from the old church, and we're trying to get him back to where he belongs. There was an altar with 3 statues. The one statue is there now, and the one has, I think, went on to the Midwest somewhere. And then this is St. John, so one of these days he'll go back. These are all cream separators. When you take the raw milk, you put it into a hopper like at the top there, and you crank it and crank it and crank it, and out of those different spigots there, the skim milk will come out one part, and the part that you're going to, the cream, will come out that you're going to make the butter out of, will come out of the other spigot, and that separates it. You don't have to do it by hand. Before that, they had dishes, and you would skim the cream off the top and make the butter out of cream. This is a kind of a mechanized churn. This is a even more cruder mechanized churn that you would throw the cream in there and crank it and crank it and crank it. This was for washing clothes, like in a tub like that. You would put the tub down and you would water and just go like this and like this and like this and like this and wash and wash and wash and wash.
Think how strong your arm muscles would get.
Oh, these people had
They were very strong.
Here's a washboard.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, that kind of looks like a plumber.
Like a plunger?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly like a plunger. But that's what you were doing, is plunging the clothing. And here, then you had to wring it out with a wringer like this or a wringer like that. Here we have some more crocks and jugs. They would keep vinegar or molasses in jugs like this. They grew a lot of strawberries around here, along Niagara Falls Boulevard, and over in this area, and over in Johnsburg, a lot of strawberries. And then you would put them in a crate like that to take them to market.
Oh, I thought that was a chicken crate.
Well, it's either way.
So you okay.
You can put a couple chicken. Even into the 20s, the Polish people in North Tonawanda, the ladies liked to pick out a live chicken, and then the butcher would whack its head off. And, well, my grandmother next door where I grew up, when her chickens stopped laying eggs, whack went their head, and they ended up in the pot.
You had fried chicken for dinner.
Yep.
Boys and girls, real quick behind you on the wall there.
Oh, the oxen.
Anybody remember from reading Farmer Boy or listening to Farmer Boy what that is? Alonzo got one for his birthday. Remember what it's called? Can't see the words on the wall. It's a yoke, remember? And he put Star and Bright into it. So that would be what they would use to have the oxen and then pull the plow or the
first year when the people came here, there was a man in Lockport, a lawyer, who was a land speculator around here. His name was Washington Hunt. He later became governor of New York State. And he was very beneficial to these people because only a few of them had money. The Huguenot and the French people that had become German, they had a little more money. They helped out the poor Slavic and Germanic people. But he gave them a yoke of oxen because this land was all forest and swamp. There's only a few tall trees had been cleared out of this whole area. So the whole Wheatfield area was clumps of woods and then clumps of swamp. So it had to be cleared. Now, let's see. This is another churn. This should be in a frame, and then you use, sometimes a dog would run on a runway. These are old-fashioned rakes where you would rake hay up. That is a hook that would have been on the wall this way in a harness room. and all the heavy harnesses and saddles and everything would be on this. This is what your teacher was talking about, the Schnitzelbank. You sit on it here, and you put your piece of wood in here, and you use a draw knife, and you just keep shaving and shaving and making wooden shingles like are on the front house. Okay, here's some butchering equipment, grinders and sausage stuffers back here, and a hog scraper. When you, after the hog is killed, you have to scrape, you scald it and scrape all the hairs off of the pig.
The boys and girls, remember, everything that they had or that they needed, they either had to grow or they had to raise, or then if like sugar and molasses, things like that, they had to maybe grow enough wheat or flax to then trade with to get money in order to purchase those things. So if they wanted ham and they wanted bacon, they had to raise pigs, and then they had to slaughter them and then process them, just like we read about when Ingalls did it and when Almanzo's father did it. Same thing, same sort of time frame that we're talking about for right here.
Now the corn that we saw out there that was drying on the corn hook, those kernels would be put in something like this. And you would walk along, somebody would have made the furrows, and you went like this, would drop a seed, drop a seed, drop a seed, drop a seed. Can you imagine planting a whole cornfield that way? Drop a seed, drop a seed, drop a seed. And then these were used for sifting wheat from the chaff. This one was probably used for sifting. When you burn coal in the coal stoves, some of the coal doesn't burn, and you can sift out the ashes. Excuse me, you sift out the ashes, and then the good coal, you can reuse it and burn it up again. These are woodworkers' tools for planing, to make a surface. Like, see there, that's a rough bench used for butchering. But if you want something fancy for in your house, this blade down here, you keep going like this and it will plane it out and make it smooth. We just got a couple more things I want to show you. This, when you planted the wheat or rye or oats, in the old days, before we had reapers and things, the man went along, and that blade there, and that's another thing, if you can imagine doing a whole wheat field like this. You swung this, it would cut the wheat off at the bottom, so you had the straw and the wheat on the top. And they got very good at it, and it would lay onto here, and then it would go like this, and it would come off in like a kind of a bundle, and another person would come behind you, and they knew how to tie it together with another piece of straw. So that to harvest a whole field of wheat was just incredibly, these people had to be very, very strong, just incredibly. But then, once you got the wheat, and with the straw attached to it, now you had to thresh the wheat kernels out of the straw. And you use, 2 men would usually, one on one side, one on the other, and a lot of the barns had a door there and a door there, so the wind would blow through. And you took this, I don't want to hit anybody with it, but it's called a flail. And you would took this and throw it, it would come down onto the heads of the wheat, and it would break the kernels away from the wheat, from the straw, and then you would have your wheat, and you would use something like that to get the chaff away from the...
I didn't think both doors were open.
Both doors were open on either side,
So
and the wind would blow through.
And blow away
Take some of it away.
blow away the chaff. Because you didn't want the chaff, you just wanted the wheat seeds.
Just one little detail too. How many of you have seen a picture of an Egyptian sarcophagus like King Tut, right? He's holding 2 things in his hands as it's crossed over his chest. Those 2 things that King Tut is holding in his hands on this coffin is a chaff, right, the thresher there, and a crook or a shepherd's hook. So those are 2 farming implements he's got in his hands. Mm-hmm. So they have used a tool like that, the one that Don has just shown, for thousands of years, and the people here continue to use it.
125 years, when cutting bars that the horse would bring, and and you could ride on it, the man would ride on it, the horse would be pulling it, and it would cut the wheat, so you didn't have to do it by hand like this. And then the threshing machines came in. And now, you may have seen combines around this area. A great big, almost like a paddle wheel in front of it, pulls it, cuts it, pulls it in, and threshes it out all in the same machine.
Owen Perlin, his grandpa is Hoover. So,
Okay,
yep, and
I was gonna ask
written on
if
it.
anybody here is a descendant. Anybody in this group, do you know?
Let's see, well, Hoover could be, and then Devontier. So
Devontier.
this is Doris Devontier's
Okay,
grandson.
all the Devontiers come from one Devontier. I'll tell this story real quick. In 1843, Mr. Salinger came over, but his wife didn't come with him. She didn't want to leave her inheritance. They could only take so much money with them out of the country. So she stayed there. The next year he went back, and they missed each other so much. He's one of the only ones that we know that actually ever went back. And she came back with him in 1844. But they had no children. So after another few years, he let it be known over in Prussia, I believe her family was related to the Devontiers, which, now Devontier is Devontier, that's Huguenot. The French people were so persecuted, the French Protestants were so persecuted in France, and the French, like Alsace and areas like that, that in the 1600s, they were actually killed. And the Prussian king needed people because after the 30 Years' War, which is, you'll learn about this later in your life probably, if they still teach this stuff in school, the area where my people and the Devontiers come from was decimated. There were whole villages just sitting empty. So the Prussian king let it be known in France that if those people could get there, he would give them 10 years, he would give them land, give them 10 years no taxes, and 10 years no military service, which was a great big thing. So we had just as many French names as we did German and Slavic names. Because if you're Prussian, if you say you're Prussian, you're all mixed up. So they actually, in Berkel's Germany, they had a French mayor one year and a German mayor the next year, and they kept rotating. They actually had a French school. The museum in Berkel's Germany is in the old French school. Now, this was a butchering bench where you would throw what you couldn't use as you were cutting the pig up. You would throw the offal would be the word for it, offal with an O, that you couldn't use at all. But they used almost everything out of the pig. And then these were used to put pieces in they were going to put in. Now, I can still remember my grandmother just when I was just maybe this big. It's just my earliest memories of her making sausage, grinding up the meat and putting it, she would take the intestines out of the pig, and you cut them in lengths about like this, and you put them in boiling salt water, then you turn them inside out and clean them out real good, and then there's the sausage stuffer over there at the very end in the back there, that you hook that casing onto, and you push it down and keep stuffing your ground up meat mixture into there. Meat, and she used to put a little bit of beef with a lot of pork and maybe a little sage or something like that. So, okay, I guess that's about it here.
Luke, you have a question?
Yeah, what was the saw used for?
Well, this is a saw that two men would have used. One man would have been on this end and one man on that end, and you would pull. See, all these. The four corners of this building, the man that redid it, he looked at the grains and everything, and all those four corners came out of one tree. So that tree had to be about this round. So you had to cut things like down with something like this. They actually had bigger saws than this, but on the same principle, where two men would
Be back and forth.
yeah,
back
just
and forth.
like the same hard work it was to harvest a field of oats or wheat. It just took immense manpower to do it.
So it couldn't just be one family to build their house. They relied on their relatives and their neighbors, and everybody helped.
Everybody had to help each other. Getting back to the Devontiers, this Mr. Salinger had no children. So after a couple of years, he let it be known among the nephews in Germany, and the nephews were by the name of Devontier. And he let it be known that because he had no heirs, if someone would want to come over and take over, they could. They would get his estate. And one Devontier nephew came over, and all the Devontiers in this whole area and in the Midwest are descended from that one Devontier.
So guess what, Noah?
You go right back to
You and I are related.
Oh, well, there's lots of us that are related. I'm probably related to you and you.
My mother was a Devantier.
Yeah.
Karen Devantier Stolting.
Yeah, well, I'm related to the distantly the Stoltings and the Bolton. I don't even remember how I'm related to the Stoltings anymore, but there's a big old house on Walmart Road, I think, as it crosses the boulevard. And many years, like 40, 50 years ago, there was an auction there. And there were old people standing around speaking Plattdutch. And some of the things they pulled out of that big old barn, they didn't even have an English word for it. They just had a Plattdutch word for it. And these two old ladies were standing in front of me, and they were talking Plattdutch. And the one lady turned around, she looked at me, and I was about probably 17, 18. And she said, "You understood part of what we said, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Who's your grandfather?" And I said, "Ed Schroeder." And she said, "Oh, God, we're cousins." You know? So that because the people intermarried a lot, the original families, everybody eventually became related to everybody else. So I can't think that there's anything more.
All right, does anybody have any questions before we
Yeah,
leave
more questions?
Einhaus and go into the first building? No?
This also would have been covered over, and see, we have some bales of straw up there and other implements, mostly hay and straw. Straw was used for bedding for the horses and the animals, and the hay is what the cows ate. Pigs would eat just about anything. Everything was saved, any table scraps or anything, extra milk, skim milk, buttermilk. Pigs eat just about anything. They love corn.
And if you look up on the ceiling here on the living side, the human side, you can see the remnants of the plaster coating.
Later on in this building, to make it a little more fancy, they actually used, they made little chip marks and the plaster held on to it. The base of this lamp here was used to light, before electricity, was used to light the church in St. John's Wood. I found a few of those in the basement before they took down the old church that I remember. There was actually a church before there. The church that's there now is the third church.
All right, boys and girls, what do we say?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, boys and girls, for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.